to borrow from his aspect. It captures the view that he has about what man and nature's link should be. As he says, to her fair works did nature link the human soul. But the human soul is linked to nature, with everything that is fair, the fair works of nature. That regardless of what nature may be considered, the works, the atmosphere, the environment, etc., all is fair. Fair works. They're beautiful to look at. There's a beauty even in the roughest storm. He says the soul is linked to that. Nature links the human soul to all that is in nature. But man doesn't appreciate that. Instead, it grieves my heart to think what man has made of me. Those words essentially will capture what Wordsworth's romantic view will be. That if man will simply return to nature, will go back to the way nature and man should be, that link, then all will be right with the world. That the world will prosper, the world will grow, the world will establish a harmony, but man won't do that. Man has done to man all these egregious acts. And that's, he says, is the problem. It's not what nature does to it. Nature isn't doing anything to man. Nature instead is offering man the way to really, not necessarily perfection, but at least harmony. We used that word earlier. But to find harmony in the world. But man fails to appreciate that. Man wants to do something else. And in these brief lines, as it says, written in early spring, and that becomes telling, the idea of that spring, the promise, and here we are. Technically, we're not in spring yet. We don't get there for a few more days, basically 3 weeks, but you're about to go on spring break, which, okay, so we meet, 2 times this week, and we don't see you again until the 16th, so, okay. The idea of spring raises the concept of promise. Metaphorically, spring is that season that offers hope of renewal, hope of new birth, regeneration, the chance for growth. All this comes through because of spring. So the lines are written in early spring. And it offers us then that attitude. And the last stanza, if this belief from heaven be sent, if such be nature's holy plan, have I not reason to lament what man has made of man? He does his echoing. But again, he goes back talking about if all this is how, when we look at nature, and the rest of the poem talks about different aspects of nature, especially coupled with spring. He says, if this belief from heaven be sent, if this is how we are supposed to be, if really it is a heaven-sent understanding of how the world should be and how man should fit into the world, do I not, and should I not lament what man has done to man, what man continues to do to each other, how man has taken a world that could be a world of harmony and has created instead, as he's looking at now, a very chaotic world. Again, this is 1798. The Reign of Terror has been going on for quite some time in France. It won't be too much longer. In fact, a little over a year, you're going to start seeing the rise of Napoleon in France, and then suddenly by the early part of the 19th century, the world is basically going to be tossed into a chaotic world, essentially a world war, the Napoleonic Wars. And he's looking at this going, how did we get this far along? How could this have happened to us? We're not meant for this. What have we done to each other that this is where we wind up? You have to go back to me now. Sorry. The next poem that you have there is called Expostulation and Reply, and it has some interesting concepts also, where he talks about how we can just need to sit and listen to the world. But the one we want to look at next is Tintern Abbey, which is a considerably long poem in the sense of, it's over 150 lines. We're not going to try to read all of it. I'm just going to hit some highlights for us of some of the key points. And it is a reflection. Now, the lines are written in 1798, but it is a reflection of a previous visit to the same place. As indicated from the beginning, 5 years have passed. And then he changed it, 5 summers with the length of 5 long winters. And notice the use of the seasonal aspects to create that sense of contrast that he wants to do. And he uses that frequently. He's looking at a place. He goes up to the ruins of an abbey. That would be, of course, an abbey would be a monastery-style structure, church. And it is one that is in ruins, essentially, it's in decay. But he sits there and he looks out over this valley. And he's able to just look at nature all around. And that's what the poem focuses on. It focuses upon coming here in this place again and seeing the world and considering what it is that's going on. You have a little note here in the textbook from Norton. Let's see if I can get that just a little bit bigger so we can do that. Yeah, we'll pull it over here like that. Where Wordsworth offered this comment: "No poem of mine was composed under circumstances more pleasant for me to remember than this. I began upon leaving Tintern after crossing the Wye, and concluded just as I was entering Bristol in the evening after a ramble of 4 or 5 days with my sister. Not a line of it was altered, not any part of it written down till I reached Bristol." The poem was printed as the last item in Lyrical Ballads. And that's really what he looks at when he offers that comment. He tried to show that this was a poem that he did not try to work on, in the sense that write the lines down, go back, reshape the lines, try to redo something with the lines, try to manage them, if you will. For him, this is a poem that he said flowed from him. As he went back to his old haunt, if you will, had his sister with him, Dorothy, and they were very close. And as he's looking at this, he's basically sharing with her, his younger sister. When I was here the last time, this is what I saw. Oh, I hope that you also are having these feelings. You have some little comments like that throughout the poem. The note that he put in here when he republished this in 1843, when the Lyrical Ballads went through another publication at that time, upon his being named Poet Laureate, in fact, is when that occurred. He is expressing that this is a poem I did not have to do anything to. That it is a poem that reflects the full romantic belief. If man opens himself to nature and allows the spontaneous feelings from his heart for nature to flow, there is no need for revision. There is no need for correction, because man's link to nature, from the other poem, is so strong, if man will only allow it to be, that man fits right in as a part of nature and is in harmony, and what man will then produce will be harmonious. He says, look, I wrote this poem because I allowed nature and my soul to connect, and this was spontaneous overflowing from my soul. Here it is. I don't have to do anything to it. I didn't have to go back and try to check the meter. I didn't have to go back and try to figure out images and see if I could correct this one or that one. So no, it came from me over a course of just a matter of 3 or 4 days. That's it. It didn't take long. I was there, I saw it, I reacted, and I responded. It is a work then, and we'll take it off the dot camera, that is very expressive of how he is reflecting on what life used to be, what he hopes life will be also. At one point in the poem, this is line 120, so 119. So though yet a little while may I behold in thee what I was once, my dear, dear sister. And this prayer I make, knowing that nature never did betray the heart that loved her. 'Tis her privilege through all the years of this our life to lead from joy to joy. For she can so inform the mind that is within us, so impress with quietness and beauty, and so feed with lofty thought that neither evil tongues, rash judgment, or the sneers of selfish men, nor greeds where no kindness is, nor all the dreary intercourse of daily life shall e'er prevail against us, or disturb our cheerful faith, that all which we behold is full of blessings. I guess I can't put that on me. Oh, probably wouldn't all fit, but I guess it will. There you go. Starting with this "oh yet," and then down to full of blessing. That segment of the poem really serves as what he saw as the purpose of this poem, not just to his sister, but what he wanted others reading this poem also again. It is in 1798 what he saw as the purpose of his life. To bring to the world this view that nature will provide us, it will never betray us, it will instead allow us to prevail over all that is against us, so that all we behold will be full of blessings. And that's a remarkably hopeful attitude. It is an attitude that for Wordsworth and those who are going to come after him, they struggle to maintain that hopefulness. It is a struggle. They're looking at a world that is not going to go the way they hoped it would. They're going to look at a world that becomes immersed in a war that seems to be just violent, and one that centers upon a number of issues, but especially, as Wordsworth looked at, on the vanity of man. Why are we fighting? Because we want to get something from it? And why is this person engaging us? Why is Napoleon doing all this? Because he wants to gain. And he looks at not only the war, but he also starts looking at this rise in industry. It's during this time that we start seeing the rise of an industrial nation. England becomes much more of a country that focuses upon expansion of and use of resources. The coal industry increases dramatically during this time because factories are being built and they need coal to maintain the factory engines. There's going to be the need for labor. There's going to be the need for continued expansion and finding of new resources. And sometimes along with that comes poverty, because suddenly towns grow. You suddenly have England become much more urban centered than anything else. The agri-central aspect of it diminishes. London increases dramatically in size. Manchester, Birmingham, a number of other areas grow tremendous. The factories take hold in these towns. and the workers go where the work is, and it's not pleasant work. The people working in the coal mines are worked literally almost to the point of death. There are going to be changes to labor laws in the Victorian era, but right now there's not any of those. What you wind up with is a top-heavy system again, where those who own and run the factories are making money, but those who are working in the factories don't make that much. Young people are working. It's not going to be till, again, the Victorian era that you're going to start having labor laws passed. Child labor laws. You had 7, 8, 9-year-olds working in the coal mines. And folks, they didn't just go in for a couple hours. They went in for 16-hour days. And they would work 6 days a week. And you can calculate that. That would be 96 hours a week that they would work. Because education was not mandatory. Well, Wordsworth is looking at this world, thinking about how great it's going to be, and he sees all this happening also. And it's very hard for him to maintain this optimistic view. He looks at his sister and says, oh, I hope that you will not lose this. I hope that you will hold on to this view, that will recognize just how much it will be. As it also says down here, I'm not sure, yeah, there it is. It says, may your memory be a dwelling place for all sweet sounds and harmonies. So then, if solitude or fear or pain or grief should be thy portion, with what healing thoughts of tender joy will you remember me and these my exhortations. This idea that what he's looking at, what he's hoping for, what he is embracing at this time is the idea that we have to have something we can count on. We have to find that idea and that view. Because later, it's not going to be that easy for him. It's not going to be that easy. One of the later poems that you have in your collection of Wordsworth poems, I'll skip over this one. I'm trying to get the page, bear with me. Does show this attitude of hope still, the idea of seeking to gain. Again, I'll put it on the dot camera so we can all see it. It serves as, sometimes as just a preface to Odes to Immortality, page 335, for those of you with the Norton. This poem called My Heart Leaps Up, you'll see that it was written in 1802, and then it was published eventually in 1807 in a collection. It will sometimes be the opening, it'll be a little prelude to Intimations of Immortality that comes after it. This is one where you have still that positive view, that hopeful attitude. Again, very simple, very short, just in a little 9-line poem. But there is one aspect to it that does show you that maybe cynical view. Talks about his heart leaping up, looking at when he sees a rainbow, the idea about responding to nature. My heart leaps up when I behold a rainbow in the sky. And then you have the next part. So was it when my life began. So be it now I am a man. So be it when I shall grow old. And then we have line 5 before that comes out. So was it when my life began. So is it now I am a man. So be it when I shall grow old. That hopefully this appreciation of nature, this response to nature, his heart leaping up when he sees a rainbow, regardless of how many times, regardless of how frequently it may occur, or infrequently, just the sight of that natural phenomenon, the sight of it allows him to feel the connection, the closest, his heart leaping up and responding. And if it doesn't, let him know. And that's a cynical attitude. That's sort of a depressing attitude. That when life fails to generate that appreciation. Excuse me. When man can no longer look at nature and respond, then life itself has lost its purpose. That one may as well die. That's okay, a little problematic at times. The next part, sometimes you'll see quoted in a number of different places. The child is father of the man. It's a line that you'll frequently see. But then the last part again goes back to his view, his attitude, what man's relationship to nature should be. And I could wish my days to be bound each to each by natural piety. And you have a little footnote there in the Norton edition where it talks about the idea about piety, which says that perhaps as distinguished from piety based on the Bible, which rainbow is a token of God's promise to Noah, never again to send the flood to destroy the earth, that what this one should represent instead is a natural piety, this holy thoughts and attitude toward nature that is also not only that, but it is a natural piety, one that stems directly from man's soul. As I said earlier with the poem we looked at first, the link that nature and the human soul should have, the fair works that nature links to the human soul. We're supposed to have that. So we should have and maintain in this attitude of respect, of worship, when we look at nature, not seeing how we can abuse it, not seeing how we can only take from it and not give back to it. The Wordsworth poems, his views and attitude, a century plus later, century and a half later, are going to be looked at. The ecological movements that really kicked off. Some will say actually starting in the time of the presidency of Theodore Roosevelt, when we have our first of our national parks established in this country. Especially though in the 1960s, 70s, and even more recently. Some of these ecological concerns, many of them have gone back to Wordsworth and used some of his poems to express those views. That seventh line attracts quite a bit of attention though. The child is father of the man. It seems almost, oxymoronic. How can the child be the father? So that it's contradiction, paradox at that time. But it raises an interesting point, which we frequently try to get across. That how someone is when they are young, he or she is young, that is how that person can probably turn out to be when he or she is older. That the way the child is brought up, the way the child learns to behave, how the child develops, will put in place what the man, the adult, will be. Psychologists still look at that. And they talk about the impressions of childhood and how those manifest themselves when we reach adulthood. Bruno Bettelheim, a child psychologist in the 70s, wrote a book called The Uses of Enchantment, in which he discusses the impact of fairy tales on the psyche of children and what lessons are gained from those, so that we are absorbing, perhaps not directly, but we are metaphorically and symbolically absorbing lessons when we hear those fairy tales. Many of those views about that child psychologists will, of course, have. Well, maybe this is what the line is offered by Wordsworth represents, that the child is father of the man. That how we are as adults stems from how we were as children. idea that can we learn from what we had as children? Hopefully. Can we make adjustments and changes? Possibly. Hopefully we can at times. But it does raise an interesting aspect, which is one of the focus aspects of Wordsworth's work. That we constantly need to be re-examining where we have been, what we are like. Tintern Abbey. 5 years have passed. 5 summers over the course of 5 long winters, he says. Revisit where we have been. Recognize what it is that we were like then. What are we like now? And do we need to change back? Do we need to understand who we were earlier and not lose that attitude? As he tells us, dear sister in the poem, when life seems to be overwhelming you, when there are moments that seem to just present one grief after another, reflect. Consider what the world can offer, what it used to offer, what it has offered you in the past, and draw from there. Recognize the happy blessings that nature provides. And it becomes a little, against the term, romantic to say it that way. That, when the world is being difficult and challenging to you, just think about happier times and pull yourself through it. It is a work that offers such views. Now, another work, this is one that's a little bit later. And let me get up here to it, 347, yes. This one was also written around the same time as My Heart Leaps Up, a little bit later actually. They were both published around the same time, 1807. This is A World Is Too Much With Us. In the Norton, it's on page 347. But The World Is Too Much With Us is one of the sonnets. And we talked about Charlotte Smith and her influence on them, the sonnet form, and we talked about the use of sonnet forms by earlier writers, and that they went back to this, that they drew on this. Well, this is one that you'll see frequently anthologized. The World Is Too Much With Us. Again, it is an example of the sonnet form. In this case, this is what we consider the Italian sonnet, Petrarchan sonnet form. We know that because you got A, B, B, A, B, B, A, supposedly. Okay, tune, boom. So you have that presentation of the rhyme pattern, which the ABBA octave is a standard form for the Italian sonnet form. So he's drawing on the Italian sonnet form, he's going back to the quote-unquote original, if you will. When the sonnet developed, it was, we go back to Petrarch and to Dante for the earliest of the sonnets, meaning little song. Petrarch especially influential in that. It's not going to be until the 15th century that the sonnet form arrives in England, and then by the 16th century the sonnet form will have been changed a little bit because, let's face it, not as many words rhyme in English as they do in Italian. So you need a little more rhyme pattern. So they wind up extending the rhyme, because essentially an Italian sonnet could have at most 5 rhymes. And the first 8 lines are only going to rhyme with 2. You're only going to have 2 rhymes for over half the poem. So that makes it a little challenging sometimes when you're dealing with English. So the English sonnet form takes on a different pattern. It's also called the Shakespearean sonnet form. It does 3 quatrains: A, B, A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F, E, F. So you're up to 6 rhymes by the time you go through 12 lines. And then you conclude with a couple, GG. So you wind up doing 7 rhymes instead of at most 5. So it adds a couple more rhymes. You have to have meaning words rhyming. It's a little easier to do. You only have to come up with basically 2 per line to rhyme. Whereas you have to come up with something a little more. But in Italian, it's easier to do. Well, this is an Italian form, so he's going back to the original because, of course, he wants to go back to original. draw on what is the start, as he sees nature also. And this is a poem, again, no title to it, just we use the first line, in which he expresses a view of looking at what society has become, where the focus of society is, and what he believes should be the focused aspect of man, really. The world is too much with us, late and soon. Getting and spending, we lay waste our time. And those first two lines offer that view, the getting and spending. This is a world that he sees as becoming so caught up into the capitalistic attitude. You get, you spend, you get, you spend. You try to get more. A world that has a materialistic side to it, and therefore is not really appreciating what the world should be. It's in that opening two lines that we see where Wordsworth has viewed the world has become. Now this is just a few years after he's written Lyrical Ballads, in which he has looked at the world where he says, okay, let's get back to nature. Oh, it'll be great. We're going to do all this. Nature has a cling to our soul. This is how we are. When I said, no, this is what we've become. The earlier line, what man has done to man, comes through. This is what we've done to it. We have concentrated on gaining materialistically to the point where we are not part of nature anymore. The next line reflects that. Little we see in nature that is ours. That we're not part of it anymore. That what we have and what we tend to create in the world is not natural. And we're not appreciating what we should really appreciate. Next parts of the poem says that we've given our hearts away. Remember the earlier concept that he says that nature has created a link to the human soul, and that it's our hearts that are supposed to be responding. So we've given our hearts away. We've taken that which should be the best part of ourselves, and we have sold it. We have literally sold who and what we are. He goes on down and begins to look at aspects of nature, and again, notice that this time he brings in natural images. As opposed to my heart leaps up when I behold a rainbow in the sky, rainbow and brilliant colors. Now, it says the sea bears her bosom. The winds that will be howling, gathered up now like sleeping flowers. Decided that nature is not quite chaotic, but is not peaceful in this way. The winds that are howling, these are not the gentle breezes that he talked about in parts of Tintern Abbey. Breezes blowing, the feeling of that. No. Now the winds that will be howling. He says, for everything we are out of tune. It moves us not. That when we look at nature now, we're not part of it. We're not in tune. We have not created that sense of harmony with nature. That harmony, that the other words we looked at for Wordsworth, trying to get that across, wanting that to be understood. So we don't have that anymore. That's not what we have. Instead, what we have is a world and human nature that is out of tune, that is not moved, does not connect, does not feel when it looks at nature. And that's when he offers this one. He'd rather be a pagan in a creed outworn. He'd rather go back to some ancient religious idea, so that even religion is getting a little condemnation here. That he would rather be a pagan in a creed outworn. So that standing at this place, on this, cliff where he's looking out over the sea, whether the wind is howling and the waves are crashing, but regardless, it is a pleasant lead looking at this. Whether the sea is calm or whether the sea is crashing. It says, I would then be able to be less forlorn. I would be able to appreciate more. I would fit in more. if I went back to that old aspect, at least they had an appreciation of nature. After all, we use this reference here about Proteus and Triton. And you have a little footnote for that in the Norton book, which, let's see if I can push that up there a little bit. Yeah, there you go. The sea deity expressed as blowing on a conch shell. Proteus, the old man of the sea, who could assume a variety of shapes. It echoes several other works that he's looking at. But what we have in this one is that he'd rather go back to this ancient belief. At least they appreciate nature. You know, you think about the ancient Greeks, all their gods are nature oriented. They're all connected to nature somewhat. Well, this is what he says. We're supposed to be, we should be a part of nature. We should be connected to it. Instead, we are out of tune. We have allowed every other part to become the central aspects of our life. We have allowed our focus to be on getting and spending. We have not tried to remain in contact, to remain in nature, linked to all that is around us. Again, this is a poem that sometimes you will see used for more contemporary society. This idea of getting and spending, laying waste our power, we sometimes talk about that. And this idea about where the focus of our society is, where it should be. This idea about what it is that we are and can expect. He's looking at a world that he's really not that happy with. A world that he sees as having come to a place where it has taken the focus, what he believes the world should be, and it has become nothing more, as one of the other poems that you have here, one about London 1802, says it is nothing more than a fen stagnant. That this is a place of standing water that is becoming more and more a place that is a swamp, a place where true vision has stagnated, and that we're so caught up in the material side of life we're failing to appreciate what the world could be. Again, this is an idea that we sometimes see applied to more contemporary society. That our focus is more and more on getting and spending than on anything else. You know, we do have frequently concerns about money, issues about what we have, what we want. This idea about every time you watch TV, there are commercials. Every time you listen to the radio, there are commercials. Every time you go on the internet and go to sites, what pops up all around those information? Right? Basically ads, commercials for you. Look what you can get. Get this, get this, get that. You have the ads about the cars that, you know, right now I'm not sure what year model they're talking about, but they're talking about, it's 2015, but I think they're already talking about 2016 cars. Which, okay, we're not close to that yet, but they're already, you know, I've seen that for one. Okay, that's just strange. But they talk about getting cars, oh, what you want. The one that comes to mind immediately, the one about the Buick. And nobody can recognize it's a Buick, but the other people are always getting the Buick. Oh, we don't recognize the Buick, oh, because, you know, Buicks, you know, what a Buick should be, oh, well, don't, you know, worry about your expectations, get all these wonderful sides to it. The girl who comes out looking for her friend, and is on the phone saying, you know, where are you? I don't see you. Oh, I'm in the Buick. How many of you would say that? I'm in the Buick. No, you're going to say, I'm in my car. I'm right here. I can see you. I'm right next to you. It's the silver. You tell them it's a silver car. You wouldn't say the Buick, right? Or the couple that's looking out, saying, "Oh, they got a new car. What kind did they get? I don't know. Can't you see the little seal on the front?" I would think so. If you're looking out that closely, you probably see the little emblem which shows it's the Buick. we get caught up in that. This idea about name recognition, having to buy certain kinds of goods because, of course, of the name recognition. Having to dress in certain ways, have certain jobs because of certain kinds of salaries that you get. The idea about what you then can afford, the idea about what kind of house you should have, what kind of goods you should have, which phone you should have. You know, the iPhone 6 or the 6, whatever it is, Plus came out, right? Everybody had to have it, right? People stood in line waiting for it to come out. So what was wrong with the other phone? You know, what was wrong with that? But we do that. We get notices after 2 years because we always have these 2-year contracts. You're eligible for an upgrade. Come get a new phone. And we do. Right? Yep. We get notices that they've come out with new iPads. Oh, we have to go get the new iPad, some new tablet. Right? We have to go get those. We always want newer being better. And we're sort of looking at this and what are we doing? Little we see in nature that is ours. What have we really done? Again, that was written 2 centuries ago. Around 1803 or so is when he was writing. Over 2 centuries ago, he writes that. In the Norton book, on page 292, they have the preface to the Lyrical Ballads. They have some little comments here from the editors. The Longman book also has a commentary about it. And then you actually have the preface to Lyrical Ballads. Because when he publishes Lyrical Ballads, he and Coleridge, which Coleridge doesn't contribute much, Wordsworth actually writes this lengthy preface, this introduction to it, trying to explain, here's what we were trying to accomplish when we wrote all these poems. And it basically is an essay over poetry. We're going to look at, though, what the editors have said, and then we're going to look at his preface next time, probably. So read Wordsworth's preface to Lyrical Ballads in your book. In the Norton, it's pages 293 through page, it's along, 304. It's about 11 pages. It's also in the Longman. I just don't know what the pages are in that one. But if you have a Longman, it's still in there. It's that prose part right before the lyrical ballads. But this is what the editors of the Norton anthology have written about it. They said that Wordsworth prefixed an advertisement. I didn't even say advertisement. Okay, advertisement. Certain the majority of the poems would be to be considered as experiments to determine how far the language of conversation in the middle and lower classes of society is adapted to the purposes of poetic pleasure. That's one of the quotes we're going to look at as he makes his comment. The preface, by the time you have the 3rd edition that came out in 1802, because it goes through several editions, he goes back and adds to it. He just keeps adding to this preface for after several years. And that's the version you guys have, that 1802 version. But this is what the editors have said. Like many radical statements, this is right here, this preface that he writes is considered a radical statement. Because really, this is where you look and say, okay, this is what Wordsworth was thinking when he publishes this book. It says, like many radical statements, it claims to go back to the implicit principles that govern the great poetry of the past, but have been perverted in recent practice. This idea of the poem we just looked at, in which he talked about little we see in nature, as I'd rather be a pagan and a creed outworn, that we have, in all phases of life, moved from where we should be. That we have not advanced, despite what society would say, but we have gone through retrograde. It goes on that Wordsworth asserts the valid language of poetry on which he bases his attack on the poetic diction of 18th century poets. 1700s, he says, are full of people who wrote poems just for the sake of the sound of the words, not for the conveyance of ideas. He says we don't need that. We need words that convey ideas. Coleridge, as Ezra said, Coleridge pointed out that Wordsworth's argument is far from clear. He really doesn't. Coleridge, this later in his life, he becomes much more known as a lecturer and his comments about literature, and that's when he makes one of those about Wordsworth. He says, he says this, but it's really not as understood as it should have been. It could have been. Here's what he really was trying to mean. Coleridge tries to clarify something, but Wordsworth really says that he felt that those people in the early part of the 18th century, especially those who were caught up in the focus on rhyme and sound, and really he's looking at writers, among others, Alexander Pope, because Pope really builds on this idea of rhythm, the number of syllables in a line, this idea about rhyme pattern, how you need to emphasize rhyme to have the connection and the fluidity of a word. And Wordsworth is looking at Pope and other writers, especially those who are not as skilled as Pope, who, in trying to follow the style that Pope establishes, Wordsworth felt they basically just ruined all that poetry should be. Because you get caught up in rhyme everything, rhythm everything, have the same number of syllables, do all this. He goes, that's not how it needs to be. The editors go on and make this comment. When Wordsworth asserted in the preface that he deliberately chose to represent incidents and situations of common life, he translated his democratic sympathies into critical terms, justifying his use of peasants, children, outcasts, criminals, madwomen, as serious subjects of poetic, even tragic concern. As it says also here at the bottom, that he attacked the neoclassic principle that required the language in many kinds of poems be elevated over everyday speech by a special, more refined, dignified diction by artful figures of speech. It says we don't need that. It says we don't have to have it. That we are writing in a language of the common man. Because it says that's who's important in this world. I made a comment earlier that he is seeing a world that has changed. The feudal system gone, basically. This class system in France basically is being reworked, but it's still a class system. You still have nobles, you still have those who are peasants. It's just that they're not necessarily working on farms anymore, because those have dwindled in importance. But what you now have are the factory owners and the factory workers. And he says there's still the disparity. We still have those who are working not benefiting. Those who are literally forced into labor not really gaining the benefits of that. It's going to be a complication that's going to exist for quite some time. It will give rise to, among others, in 1819, we're going to have the St. Peter League Massacre, which is a social issue, a working class issue. You're going to wind up with strikes. You're going to wind up, as I said, by the time we get to the Victorian period, the 1830s, we're going to start seeing some changes in laws. But you still see abuse of the system. And Wordsworth in 1800 is saying we need to express our views, and poetry can still have a power to do so. It is not just for entertainment. It can have political ramifications. It's a challenging aspect when we look at that, because he goes on, and Ezra's go on and make this comment. Let me get this. Gotta get that just a little bit. Okay. That His views about the valid language of poetry are based on the new premise that all good poetry is a spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. That becomes really the line out of his preface that the Romantics are going to focus on, that critics are going to focus upon, saying here's what Romanticism really is: a spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. The editors phrase it this way: spontaneous, that is, at the moment of composition, even though the process is influenced by prior thought and acquired poetic skill. What he said earlier about Tintern Abbey, Wordsworth claiming it was written without alteration. That that his works were developed because how he felt, and he wrote it in that way, allowing it to move from his soul to the paper. They did not have to go through and draft, spending weeks, days, weeks on it. No. The editors say that his assertions about materials and diction have been greatly influential. And that's true. It's going to be what the next generation, when we get to them, the Byron, Shelley, Keats group, what they're going to feel, how they're going to react. What they see is, this is what we need to do. The editors though make this comment. It says, but in the long view, other aspects of his preface have been no less significant in establishing its importance, not only as a turning point in English criticism, but also as a central document in modern culture. One reason I need you to read this preface becomes highly, highly important. People go to this, I said they pull out that part about the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings, and they say, okay, there you go. This is how we should view Romanticism. This is what Romanticism really is all about. But there are other ideas in here as well. There are other aspects to this preface that, when viewed, show us really what Wordsworth hoped. Not just for literature, but for culture. Not just for publishing a book of poetry, but what he wanted to see the world become. The editors offer you this other comment. It says that Wordsworth feared that a new urban industrial society's mass media and mass culture were threatening to blunt the human mind's discriminatory powers and to reduce it to a state of almost savage torpor. Mass media dulling the minds. That's what savage torpor would be, folks. The torpor would be languid, attitude. You don't have to think much. Oh, gee, really? Does mass media have that sort of influence? Does it really make us duller, not make us think? Think about it, folks. What was one of the biggest aspects this past weekend? They had the little Instagram figures going around about llamas. Okay? And YouTube videos and Twitter feeds all about llamas on the loose in San Diego. Okay? Llamas on the loose. Actually, it was in San Diego. Was it San Diego or Arizona? Maybe Arizona. Arizona, I guess. I think it was Arizona, wasn't it? Yeah, it was Arizona. But llamas on the loose. They made all, you know, and then you wind up with all the other retweeting and Instagram images and all that about llamas. Really? That's the big news story? That's what we need to hear about? That's what we should be considering? Remember, in his day, 2 centuries ago, mass media would have been newspapers and publishing of books. Didn't have television, didn't have radio, didn't have cell phones. Didn't have Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and Snapchat. Didn't have television to sit there for hours upon hours watching what? Yeah, reality TV shows. What would Wordsworth say today about what mass media is doing to the human mind? Would his words reduce it to a state of almost savage torpor be enough? Would he say that it is blunting the human mind's discriminatory powers? I'm not sure if that'd be strong enough. So he makes this comment in the early part of the 19th century, 1800. He offers that view. And the editors pulled this out to remind us that we're in a world that is this significantly different from what he is complaining about? Do we not read our Wordsworth enough, perhaps? And they offer this comment. It says that he, Wordsworth, attributed to imaginative literature the primary role in keeping the human beings who live in such societies emotionally alive and morally sensitive. Literature could keep humans essentially human. Those are points I want you to be thinking about. That literature has a primary role in keeping human beings emotionally alive, morally sensitive. That literature keeps humans essentially human. Because that's really a very challenging comment. I mean, it's an extrapolation from Wordsworth. And this is what your editors say. Here's what he's really trying to get across. And your editors phrase it that way. Why would you be thinking about that? I want you to look at that idea. Does literature really play that role? If so, how? What should be the role that literature has in our lives? Yeah, we have about 5 minutes to go. Okay, almost there. Making sure. When we view this preface, his comments, and I want you guys to go through, make sure you've read it, because that's what we're going to focus on next time. I know it's fairly long, but there are aspects that actually leave part of it out. That's where you see the little asterisks, they'll leave parts of it out, but you don't have all of it. But when you go through it, I want you to think about some of the comments that I try to make today, some of the points that I've said about some of his views. We're going to probably look at only a couple others of his poems. We're going to focus again mostly on the preface, his comments there. You have also in your book, you have the prelude, the 1805 prelude, which he edited and edited and edited, and eventually was published after his death in 1850. And we're going to pull a couple of comments out of that one, just for you to hear some of the views he was writing around the same time of this. But we're going to try to focus on this aspect about the world and how he saw it. The idea about what man in this world should really respect. What man should be trying to consider to improve himself in his world. And how it relates to culture. We're going to try to actually tie it into a little bit more of the modern world here today. I'm going to try to make a couple points. But we're going to look at those ideas, or those views, and try to recognize that within his work, Wordsworth gets concerned about what he sees. He becomes very passionate about that his writing does have a political edge, not as much of a political edge as we saw with some of the other works. Burke's comments and Wollstonecraft, clearly political, as she writes about vindication of the rights of man and vindication of the rights of woman. And those are clearly politically charged documents. Wordsworth is going to use the literature to offer views.
The conference is scheduled to end in 2 minutes.
Okay? There is still that political aspect when he writes. There's still that concept that he is offering to us. That there's more to his expression than just a spontaneous overflowing of powerful feelings. That's not just, oh, I saw a sunrise, I need to write about the sunrise. There's more to it than just that. And sometimes that quote that the editors pulled out, as I said, becomes the quote that everyone looks at. So that's what romantics are. Just express your feelings. Let your thoughts just flow from you. Just put them down. Oh, there you go. You've got your poem. There's more to it than that. As we can recognize, as evidenced by the effort he spends in dealing with the preface that he writes. And the fact that he goes back to this preface and revises it, and then he adds to it. So that by the 1802 version that you have, he's really tried to clarify what he sees as the point to poetry. That there is more to it than just, let's just put our feelings down on paper. That poetry should convey far more than just one individual's feelings. And we're going to just try to discuss that for us next time, as we're trying to hopefully gain a little bit of perspective of what Wordsworth accomplished, and how we look at that. Again, this will wrap up Wordsworth, which puts us back on week 7 where we're supposed to be. So we're sort of cutting some of the other background I would like to give you, but we're okay. We're good. So we'll finish that up then on Wednesday, barring any weather, which we're not supposed to have. So hopefully that will be the case. Yeah, it's just supposed to be rain. There's a chance for sleep at one time.
Well, let's hope